Hello and welcome to Festival of Ideas Online. I'm Andrew Kelly, Director of the festival. How we create a better world now and in the future is a subject central to our work. To help us debate this, we're delighted to have with us Ben Rhodes and Ece Temelkuran. Ben Rhodes is the author of the memoir, The World as It Is. He's co-host of Pod Save the World, a contributor for NBC News and MSNBC, the co-chair of National Security Action, and an advisor to former President Barack Obama. His latest book is After the Fall, Being American in the World We've Made. Ece Temelkuran is an award-winning Turkish novelist and political commentator. She writes for the Financial Times and The Guardian. Her books include Women Who Blow on Knots, a novel, and then the non-fiction work How to Lose a Country, The 7 Steps from Democracy to Dictatorship, and her latest, Together, 10 Choices for a Better Now. Thank you, Ben and Ece, for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Andrew. Yeah.
You both talk about this idea of the fall. Ben, it's in your book title, actually. Could you both talk about what you mean by that? I'll start with you, Ben.
Yeah, well, I intentionally kind of meant it to apply to different falls. But I obviously was writing after kind of the collapse of America and the era of American hegemony, if you want to call it that, with the election of Trump and the conclusion of kind of the 30-year period since the end of the Cold War. But to me, I wrote about that period after the fall of the Berlin Wall to get at the second fall being, I think, the collapse and the failure of the particular brand of American-led globalization that was the predominant factor of that 30-year period. So to me, when I'm talking about the fall, yes, I'm describing the period after the fall of the Berlin Wall, but the book is really about how did we have this collapse in kind of American credibility and really the seeming inevitability of the model of American-led globalization and its relationship to capitalism and democracy.
Okay, we'll be coming on to explore some of these issues. Ece, you talk about the fall. Was it the start of the fall for you was your experience of Turkey, or is it more than that?
I'm not much different than Ben. I'm talking about a global fall as well, global fall of democracy, and the global fall of capitalism as we know it, and the crisis of representation that follows these two falls. So yeah, by the way, yeah, my country's falling, keeps falling constantly. And as I mentioned in How to Lose a Country, as opposed to nature, political sphere does not have physical rules. There's no bottom, so the fall can be endless. Hopefully not, but it can be. So yeah, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about collapse or fall, the fall of democracy as we know it. And it is very related to what Ben just said, the American leadership and the America's inspiration of this form of democracy. It is coming to an end.
Now, one concern that you both have is the growth of fascism. I'm coming to you first, Ben, again, because you actually quote Ece at the beginning of your book. Tell us a little bit about that and your fears about the growth of fascism.
Well, look, I felt this obviously in the Obama years when you had clearly this dramatic shift towards a more authoritarian brand of politics around the world, and you had increasingly aggressive Vladimir Putin in Russia. You had Erdogan in Turkey, essentially transforming the country into a single-party dictatorship. You had Xi Jinping come in much more assertive in China, and this kind of trend, obviously, of a drift towards authoritarianism, but that drew on. And in my book, I look at Hungary and Russia in the European context. Drew on the blood and soil nationalism and fascism, frankly, of the past. And in the United States, in the course of the last decade, even long before Donald Trump, you could feel the Republican Party in the United States moving in the exact same direction, the same playbook of an us versus them nationalism that tends to scapegoat the them being minorities, being immigrants, being anybody who could be cast as an other. and really fascistic undertones to the political project of an increasingly illiberal Republican Party. And when I read Ece's book right after the 2016 election, like a lot of people, How to Lose a Country, which everybody should read if you haven't, what I found so refreshing about it, and what I put at the beginning of my book is this quote. And when you read Ece, you have a pen in your hand because you're constantly underlining. But she had this quote: "The final takeover doesn't happen with one spectacular Reichstag conflagration, but is instead an excruciating years-long process of many scattered, seemingly insignificant little fires that smolder without flames." And in addition to being such a beautiful piece of writing, it gets at what I had felt in America, which was not Trump coming out of nowhere, but this kind of steady descent into this kind of brand, this kind of particularly American experiment in fascism. And what I also liked about it is it was not bullshit. Like in America, the language we use to describe these things, we tiptoe around it. And now that's changing a bit, but coming out and comparing what was happening to the world to the Reichstag, I think was an appropriate analogy. Even if that obviously led to much more extreme violence in the years after that. But as a warning, I think it was appropriate. And so to me, Ece's book was just describing this honestly and accurately and analytically, and not with kind of overdue deference to the feelings of people who were supporting fascistic agendas.
This is interesting, Ben, because it made me think how much and how little time everything changed so suddenly. Because I wrote the book was published in 2019, and I wasn't intellectually allowed to use the word fascism. And now you're using it. I'm using it. I was using the word, which was a calming word, as opposed to fascism, right-wing populism. And now we are more and more, I think, describing it, defining it as fascism. We are no longer afraid of being seen as this naive people who are too concerned about the situation. So that is very interesting. And I loved After the Fall, by the way, because the intimacy of it was so amazing. Of course, you were part of the Obama administration. You were the consultant to Mr. Obama, and you are telling that period so genuinely, so openly, so honestly, and your self-searching and the questions you ask yourself are all in the book. It's an amazing book to understand that bit of the history, especially. But then I wonder how many people are brave enough to call this fascism in the United States, because when we were speaking about the fall, maybe I should have said this, we are also witnessing the fall of an understanding, a dominant idea about democracy, because the dominant idea was that if there is free market economy, there's freedom and therefore democracy. And we all were made to believe that if totalitarianism comes, it comes from Soviet bloc. And now we are seeing that the free market economy itself and the American style democracy is actually creating some sort of messy form of fascism. And we, like in Turkey, in Russia, or in Hungary, these are more in the periphery, I would say, in terms of democracy. Whereas United States, Britain, these are countries that are known to be the mature democracies. So obviously nobody's immune to that. But how many people, I wonder, are aware of this fall of this understanding, fall of this idea?
Yeah. I think that, first of all, to the language, it's funny. It's interesting to hear you say you right-wing populism to fascism. I kind of settled on nationalist authoritarianism as here's where we are now. Mm-hmm. But fascism, they're characteristics of a much more extreme system about crushing the opposition and centralizing power. And the rhetoric of like a Trump is unabashedly fascistic, right? So I think that the potency of that word is the warning of where this can lead. But I think with respect to where things are now, I think Americans, one of the things I wrestled with in this book is that I had to admit that as an American, particularly an American who came of age in the kind of political consciousness of the end of the Cold War, you thought that history was moving inevitably in the right direction and that bad things could happen and they do happen, but then we kind of overcome them and things move forward. And there's a kind of an inevitability to progress. And that was tied up with America itself, that, what America's capacity to just improve itself at home and America's capacity to make sure that the world never went too far off direction. We're the ones that won World War II, and then we're the ones that held the line against the Soviets. So that was my mentality. And that's the mentality of just about everybody I served with in government, right? The kinds of people go into government, certainly the kinds of people who run industry, with the exception, by the way, of people in government, I think, who are minorities. I mean, actually, I think Barack Obama, for all the optimism he projects, as a Black person who lived in Indonesia after a CIA-backed coup led to hundreds of thousands of people dying, I mean, he understands that history is not always so simple. But here's the problem. I think, Ece, there is an awareness in America that the guardrails that we thought existed are not there, that things can happen in America that we only thought happened in other places, right? The corrupt autocrat getting elected with the son-in-law down the hall, the insurrection at the Capitol. But I do still think there's a kind of presumption that as bad as this is, it'll just kind of sort itself over time. Or, if you look at I understand Joe Biden's impulse to say America's back, but I'm not sure kind of that we're not going back to the way things were. And I think we have to more intensely scrutinize why our fingerprints on what's happened around the world. And I talk about, the American-led capitalism, American post 9/11 securitization of the world through the war on terror, and American-led created social media platforms that have wreaked havoc. These are our creations, and so I think Americans are aware that they have fallen, that things can happen in America that we all thought could only happen in other places, but I still think they're not fully wrestling with our connection to what's happening around the world. It's not something that we have to just go solve. It's something that we are a part of, yeah. And I think Americans innately tend to kind of think it's going to work itself out. When most of history is things not working itself out. I mean, I'm curious with you, when you talk to American audiences, I'm sure other Americans had the response that I did to How to Lose a Country. I'm curious the kind of reaction you probably got that question I love that you started your book with the what gives you hope question, because I've been getting asked that all the time on this book tour. I'm guessing Americans were asking you that question thinking that there is always a reason for hope because they're Americans, and so they think it's going to turn out right.
Well, I don't know what gives you hope. I'm like, can I ask you that question now? If you excuse me, Andrew.
The same thing that I think gives you hope, right? Which is there's an awareness of what's happening in the world that I don't remember there being a decade ago, and I think just people being attuned and awake to what's happening is a starting point. And then there's a mass mobilization. I've never seen this many different movements, right? From, Hong Kong to Belarus to movements for equality in Latin America, to climate strikes, to Black Lives Matter. You do just get to Belarus, you get this sense that if these movements could just connect, and people will say, well, they're failing. Well, movements fail and fail and fail until they succeed. There's an energy of people, I think, who don't like the way the world's going and are trying to activate and do something about it. And I think that inevitably gives me hope. I think what I was really interested in your latest book is kind of also what gives you hope is just the choices people are making in their own individual lives, that are more, aware of being a part of it. Americans in particular tend to sometimes not see ourselves as connected to what's happening in the greater world. And so this awareness of what's happening, this mobilization, and then, as you say, people kind of integrating, living their own lives in the way that they want to see the world, I think is a hopeful thing. And I was interested to see you focus on that. I mean, I see that led me to believe that that's ultimately it's not hope, but it is the determination, as you say, of people. The commitment of people, there's hope in that.
Well, I'm not a big fan of the word hope, as you know, Ben, and
Yeah,
Andrew
yeah,
knows this as well. I am more for the word determination. And then when I saw people, asking about hope for too many times, I realized that they are actually asking for a reason to act.
yeah,
And I felt like they lost faith in humankind in general. It's not only the United States or in Turkey. In general, there's this loss of faith in humankind. We cannot do better than this. And then I thought that this is an imposed ideology. Actually, it's a imposed morality even. So that's why I thought to write this book, so I can give new words to people who want to connect all these movements that you have been talking about now. um, I wrote, yeah, the book is yellow. Andrew just showed it. So many people think that it's a self-help book yeah, for individuals. No, seriously, it's too cheerful for our times. And I noticed that nobody wants to cheer up. Actually, it's not
yeah,
that I
yeah,
wanted. I wrote the book to cheer up people, but they were more obsessed with how to lose a country, because I think more and more
yeah.
people are afraid. And coming to fear, I'm stealing the stage here a little bit, Andrew. Sorry. Coming to fear, I realized when I read your book, you're talking about Trump era and how you felt like an exile in your own country, which was my feeling too,
Yeah.
in How to Lose a Country. And I was telling people, you don't have to leave your country in order to lose your country. You can be in your country and feel like losing it. Um, I was wondering how much of that fear is present in the United States, because obviously I'm following from afar, and I feel like there's this specter still haunting White House,
Yeah.
Trump specter, because Biden is there, seems to me, like to hold the center for the last time, like
Yeah.
Macron does in France or Merkel does in Germany. How much fear do you think is haunting White House, or in general the political sphere in United States?
I mean, I think I feel a lot of fear
Yeah.
because I detail in the book, like, this playbook is pretty similar everywhere in terms of how parties win power through elections and then turn democracies into autocracies. It's happened in Turkey, it's happened in Hungary, it's happened in Russia, it's happened in a lot of places. And it's been happening in America. So the Republican Party has been creating a way to control power in the country, even if they can't win elections. They've packed the courts, they've got a right-wing propaganda media machinery, they've redrawn congressional, our parliamentary districts so that their candidates are winning. And I could go on and on, gutted rules for money in politics so they can be financed by all this dark money. Same stuff that happens everywhere. And if you look at the current dynamic, they haven't won the popular vote for the president of the United States since 2004. They don't win the popular vote for the Senate and House, and yet they could very easily control all these levers of government. And now they're passing these laws all over the United States to not only disenfranchise Democratic voters, chiefly voters of color, and make it harder to vote, but also to give elected Republican state level officials the capacity to overturn elections. I mean, they're writing that into the law. And the thing that Trump wanted people to do in Georgia and Arizona, they're now legislating that even if the vote counters say the Democrat won this election, the Republican state legislature, and I know I'm going into the details here, but it's necessary to answer your question. The Republican state legislature can say, no, actually, we think Trump won this election. And so as soon as, like, 3 years from now, that could happen. And what happens in America after? Because why wouldn't they do that? Why wouldn't Donald Trump or the Republican Party do that? Why else are they passing these laws? And we can't stop it, even though Democrats have power, because there's some Democratic senators, I'll spare you the details, but who don't want to get rid of some Senate procedure. We can't pass laws preventing this from happening right now. And so everybody on the surface is kind of pretending like Joe Biden's back. It's great. We're back. We're spending a lot of money. The economy's going well. We get to be friends with our allies again in the world. And yet some of us are looking at this train coming down the tracks and saying, well, like, there could literally be an illiberal seizure of power in 3 years in this country, or in a circumstance where the Republicans kind of get control. And again, that the fear is just living in a country, as you've experienced, obviously, but I'm new to this as an American, where the people in power are not only bad people, but they're undemocratic, and you can't really do anything about it. Because if they kind of control who votes and who counts the votes, like, you lose agency in a democracy, right? So that is the fear that I think is still present, of just a sense of like, we're not anywhere near out of this, and the political party that has driven this is getting worse, not better.
Yeah. And it's somewhere in the book, actually, 2 times you speak about Zuckerberg, Facebook, and manipulation of information, disinformation, and so on. And unless we stop that, and there's nothing much we can do. This is the other side of the issue. And ironically, there is no democracy that is strong enough to regulate that sphere right now, which is something terrifying for me. Because it controls who controls information controls everything else. So yeah, it's a little bit terrifying, actually.
Well, and just the on that score, the degree to which people, because sometimes people say to me, and you must get this sometimes, like, well, come on, guys, it's not that bad. It's always like, history is always tough. This happens all the time. And so then, and there's some truth to that, but I was trying to think, well, what's different about now? One of the things that is different about now is technology. And in part, that means that totalitarianism, as we see in China, can be much more comprehensive. But also, like, a big chunk of my country lives in a reality that doesn't exist. They believe that the world government is made up of child sex traffickers, or they believe Donald Trump won the last election. And we're not talking about a few thousand or a million. We're talking about, over 100 million people are living in a reality that is just not real because of social media and the way that it kind of mainlines disinformation. And that's different. That's a new thing about our age.
Yeah, and we don't know how to deal with it. Like, period. So like, I was in New York Times at some point, and this was 2016, right after Donald Trump was elected, and they were giving him 1 year only, and everybody was still laughing about him. And then they were thinking that going double down on fact checking would clear out everything. And I told them, it's not going to happen like that, believe me. Now, anyway, that was the old times. Now we have to find a way to deal with this. And I think I'm absolutely sure that we will, but obviously we couldn't until this point.
Well, the thing is, what you get at in your book, right, is that to deal with this, because I was writing my book from the perspective of someone who was in position of power, then out of it. And so you sometimes think in terms of policies, right? And yes, we need to regulate what we were just talking about, social media and technology. There are all kinds of policies that need to change. But also, I kind of came to realize that, like, there needs to be kind of a societal shift. With the United States in a century that is defined by kind of identity. These are less, communism versus the Cold War, and the concept that I kept. That you offer a bunch of great ideas, but the one about what is enough.
I don't know anything about economy, by the way, and I had to read all the old capital and new capital from Piketty. But yeah, I think that means, like, sorry, I interrupted you. That's a very Middle Eastern habit of mine.
Oh, no, go ahead. Because I love this concept.
Yeah, this enough concept in economy especially reminds me of the times before the coup in Turkey, before 1980, the regulated economy, state-regulated economy. And then in order to move to free market economy, the country had to go through a military coup, which was supported by CIA, by the way. And many other countries in Africa and in Middle East had to go through that transformation, either violently or through persuasion. They ended up in free market economy. And now we know that it doesn't work. And the idea of less, which is a counter argument to more, the idea of more of the free market economy, does not work for me either. So I was thinking about enough because of regulating the economy and economic planning and so on. But it still this shift from right-wing populism to fascism was quite easy comparing to, shifting from free market economy to state-regulated economy. And it is almost impossible for United States at this point in history. I can see that, because whenever somebody talks about social justice or economic planning, they go, oh, the communists will invade this country and so on. But I think that idea, we need regulation, some kind of planning and so on, is taking hold in Europe now. I don't know what
it is.
Things, but this is the new thing, and we will be talking about this, which is what, go back to old school economic regulation and regulate in favor of the disadvantaged, the underclass, the working class, and so on.
Well, the thing about the social media platforms is they're global. So if Europe kind of decides it wants to have certain standards for disinformation or for hate speech online, they'll have to adjust to that. Ideally, what you'd like is Europe and the US to do it together. But I love that the enough concept which you describe in terms of economics. As I thought about it, it can apply to a lot of things in America, right? Yeah. Including social media. Like, when is enough? Like, how big does Facebook need to be, right? Like, how much information do people need on their phone? Like, there's a kind of mental shift around this concept of what is enough that applies to a lot of things. I mean, even in areas where I think, my concerns are about other countries, right? Like China. Part of what Americans have done is our insatiable appetite for capitalism, has both plowed tons of money into China, including, so a lot of that surveillance technologies are American venture capital, funded as much as Chinese Communist Party. And then you even see this new trend of, American movie stars apologizing for referring to Taiwan in a certain way, or, but people, when is enough? Like, you don't, because some people say, what's the government solution? So I'm like, well, how much money do you have to make? If you're at all conflicted about whether or not you should be invested in surveillance technologies that are being used to put 1 million Uyghurs in prison, like, you've lost track of what's enough. So to me, there's a lot of America's negative impact on the world in the last 30 years, and we've had some positive impact too. But the negative is our excesses, the excess of, we could never get enough security after 9/11, right? We could never get enough profit, frankly, in our kind of hyper-capitalist era. And so things were deregulated and new financial schemes were invented, which led to the Great Recession, which I think has been obviously a catastrophic event. So that, look, what you applied as an economic concept, and a concept that people can and should think about in their own lives, not just in their communities.
Well,
I feel it can be like applied much more broadly.
Well, I tried to do something quite dangerous. I tried to write a moral philosophy book and a political book without the political jargon and without the political philosophy jargon. But then, when you're speaking about morality, and what you are saying is taking enough as a moral concept, which I also did in the book. But then when you start proposing moral concepts, people tend to think that now there's this, police of morality has arrived, and there's that thing. But I do think that we need to speak about morality a little bit, at least, especially in progressive politics of today. Progressives should talk about morality, because it's not only the political damage that we are witnessing today of fascism, but also the moral damage as well. After being subjected to too much evil, people cannot believe in humankind as they did in 1970s. Something that strikes me interesting lately is that when I speak of love, for instance, human love, as a philosophical concept, people tend to smirk. And then I'm thinking, and I am kind of embarrassed to talk about it as well. Some of the concepts I brought up in the book, I am kind of embarrassed to talk about them. Yeah. Because I feel like I am this cheerful girl coming from the land of rainbows and unicorns when I talk about these concepts. But then how did we get so contaminated that we cannot seriously talk about human love as a central concept to progressive politics?
Yeah.
This is something I've been asking myself and to the audiences that I talk to or people I have a discussion with. So yeah, we are living in this century of cynicism as well as identities or several other conflicts. It's a century of cynicism. And yeah, I don't know what to do about it except for writing a book about it.
No, I see what you're saying. You know, I had this moment in my book where I described this meeting I was in with Obama and the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
And Obama, it's like 2017. Obama was more upset than he let on. And at the end of the meeting, he kind of asked this really searching question of like, everything is going the wrong direction. All the wrong people seem to be winning. Like everything is becoming so tribal. Like he was asking the Dalai Lama the what gives you hope question, or what can we do about it, or how should we think about it question. And the Dalai Lama kind of gave this answer that was essentially, you know, we are all one and we're all capable of love. And at first I was like, oh, you know, come on, you can do better than that. Like you're supposed to have all the answers. You're the Dalai Lama. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, wait a second. Like if I believe the things that I think I believe, that actually is the key point. You know, that
Yeah.
you see good in other human beings, and therefore you think that politics, society, culture can recognize that common humanity and express a love for it, right? And I think you're right because, you know, first of all, and as you and I have both written about, right, the goal of these autocrats is cynicism, right? The more people are cynical and apathetic, they're just tuned out, and then the game is over and they've won.
Somewhere in your book, if I'm correct, your mother has this library full of books about fascism. Am I right? Yeah. So, and you say that my mother tried to understand how this happened. So he was obsessed with the question and so on. So fascism, one of the things about fascism is it is spectacular, and the evil of it is so spectacular that your brain freeze because you cannot understand that kind of radical evil, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
And then actually it comes from the fact that it is the ultimate hatred of humankind.
Yes.
You know, the morals of it stands upon hating the humans, hating the self, and so on. So yeah, that's why I think, you know, we might want to promote this, you know, loving the people. Actually, we are talking about, I don't know, like universal basic income because we love humans, because we think that they should be dignified, they should have dignity, everybody should have dignity, and dignity is the, you know, concept that says we are all one, and so on. So yeah, but yeah,
I think that as you think about, you know, someone who's had to do kind of political storytelling, right? That Obama was good at, like, you know, you find other things to criticize Obama about, but political storytelling is not one of them. You know, because he wanted to connect it. You know, he connected the story he was telling about what he wanted to do and what he wanted America to be. He connected it to how people thought about themselves. You know, and he says, you know, I have this quote from him in this book too, where he's like, politics should lead you to that moment of kind of contentment and belief. Like, and you have to, I think sometimes progressives, either they're uncomfortable making emotional appeals. Sometimes they're defensive about what they believe in. So like, oh, on immigration, we have to show that we're tough. We're just a little more humane about it. Instead of saying, no, we love and value the dignity of every person. They're saying, well, I guess we want to enforce tough borders and keep out all these people, but we'll let in a little bit more than the right wing. You know, that, well, who's going to choose that argument? I mean, if you're making a version of your opponent's argument for them, but just saying you're going to be slightly better about it, well, then they might as well go with the
original,
for the original, right? Or it becomes technocratic. It becomes like, no, we're the people. We're kind of the philosopher kings who know how to kind of make the system run better, and there's a kind of competence to it. But as we've seen, you know, what's interesting to me is, Ece, like, I don't know if you've thought about this, but after the 2008 financial crisis, it wasn't obvious that the backlash would come from the right and not the left, because the left wing, our critique of capitalism was the one that was validated. You know, the inequality that led to this, the deregulation that led to this, and yet all of the backlash to that financial crisis came from the right. because they were telling a story that was more emotional. And that was the grievance-based story, which is the system is rigged. See, everything's, the political establishment's out to screw you. I can at least offer you the oldest identity in the book. We'll make Turkey great again, make Hungary great again. We hate those people and we're these people. And to me, why did the left not, when you have the better answer to the financial crisis would have been, yeah, like the rich have been screwing all of us. And so therefore we need to make profound changes to our economies. That argument, because it wasn't moral or emotional and didn't, lost out to the more visceral argument. And so I think you're absolutely right that like we have to be unafraid to infuse more morality, and even morality that, it speaks to high concepts like the capacity of human beings to love one another.
Yeah. I mean, this is not easy because emotions and, moral concepts have the habit of getting out of hand. So I understand the progressive politics do not want to, distance themselves from these concepts, but we are living also in the age of managing the emotions. And as you said, right-wing populism, fascism, they are actually manipulating these emotions on massive scale. So we have to have a word about it as well. I mean, we have to speak about it at least, how we feel and how we want people to feel and what are the moral values that we are promoting and so on. Yeah. And, this is your book is important to me only for another reason as well, because it's your personal journey.
Yeah.
And I can, the reader can follow you coming to Obama administration and then after that and so on. And you're giving personal insights and so on. And when actually I first saw the book, I thought, oh, this is after Obama's fall, fall from power. And then this is talking about Ben's fall as well, maybe, but then it's not that. But how does it feel being in power? And you talk about it in the book, but maybe you want to share as well. How does it feel being in power and then outside of it suddenly?
It's an incredibly strange experience. I think it would be in any case, so for 8 years, I'm in the White House. I'm close to the President of the United States. I went on every foreign trip with him, right? So anytime, and in the United States, by the way, you're kind of expected to comment on everything in the world, right? So you feel a connection to everything that happens in the world, because we're going to put out a statement on it, or we're going to make a call. And so to suddenly be spit out, and I was there from the first day to the last day, to be spit out on the other end, and suddenly you have nobody, you're nobody in terms of political power. You'd see an event on television that 2 days ago you would have had to be in meetings about, or you would have had to put a statement in. So that's very strange. Then you compound that with the people that replace you in power are literally like absolutely hell-bent, determined to destroy everything that you worked on. So there's this, they're literally assaulting you, and I'm a minor figure in their broad conspiracy theory. So they're investigating me, and they're putting out they're going to throw people like me in prison. And so then that is a little, you don't expect that. And people were spying on me.
I saw the Assad Black Cube and everything. It's
and so thrilling. It was. So I had the extreme experience, but then what I found that was so interesting, and this is kind of what unlocked this whole book for me, is I started to travel and meet these people. The democratic opposition in Hungary, people like Alexei Navalny or Zhana Nemtsova, a Russian whose father Boris Nemtsov was killed, or Hong Kong protesters, and I'm realizing, like, what a extraordinary experience to have been in power and working on things that impacted people like this. And now I can just go talk to them and, hey, what do you, I and then I realized, I was like, someone else must have done this who was in government, who just and I don't know why more people don't do that. Like, people who've been in positions of power should go out, instead of just talking to other people who have been and will once again be in positions of power, like, hey, go out and talk to civil society, to writers, to people that can offer you the understanding that you were missing. Because I can tell you, like, no matter how hard you try in government, you are cut off from real people. I mean, you're reading.
Have you been to Turkey during? I didn't see anything about Turkey in the book, or maybe I missed it. But if you were in Turkey, people would be asking you this question that I'm about to ask. Obama administration, let's say, has a lot to do with Erdogan becoming a global leader at the time, especially during his first period. Yeah. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, no, I think that, there was always a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this I try to reckon with as someone who's been in government. There's always what appears to be, we come in, and I remember going to Turkey in 2009. And that was when still like the kind of common view in the US and was like, well, maybe this guy has some positive attributes and then some problematic ones. And we can encourage him. There's actually a hubris to it, right? Which is that we can encourage him to be a more constructive, actor.
Well, yeah, the idea was right, but the man was wrong probably, or maybe, I don't know, the project failed immensely, and we were
it did. And to own that failure
of that experiment. And I lost a lot for that experiment. So
yeah, no, and to but this is the machinery of the U.S. government. I mean, I never felt like I was in a meeting where a decision was made to back Erdogan. What happens is, well, like then the Arab Spring happens, and maybe he can be constructive in that, and then the refugee crisis, and he's managing that, and ISIS, and we need this, and so there's always a higher priority, and I'm saying this is wrong, than democracy itself. And to me, what the United States needs is, if you look at our relation with China too, same thing. Like, why would we expect them to listen to anything we say about democracy? We clearly care more about making money in the Chinese market, about national security issues, about technological innovation. And in that way, the Chinese Communist Party is a reflection of what America's interests have been in terms of prioritization. And yes, I think what needs to change, which would be a radical shift in mindset for the last 30 years of U.S. kind of policy in the world, is democracy actually being the top priority, which, by the way, is the opposite of George Bush saying we're going to go invade countries and make democracies. Yeah. No, it's like our democratic values, the lens through which you engage another country. And wasn't enough on Turkey, obviously.
Yeah, it's ironic that we are now both the victims of the same project, because in 1950s and 60s, and 70s even, the right-wing propaganda for Turkey was Turkey is going to be a little America. And now, after Trump came to power, people were, and I was one of them, joking, oh, now America became a bigger Turkey.
Yeah. Well, you also saw, I mean, you also get this kind of, this is why it has to infuse, it's not just about foreign policy, because you also have this feeling, well, what can we really do about this? We can be critical of Erdogan, but nothing will change. We can issue statements, but this is why it has to infuse the way nations know you're going to engage with them, that every choice isn't a choice. It's just inevitable that America is going to prioritize democracy. And by the way, Americans should learn the little Turkey joke you make. I mean, look at the weird relationship between Trump and Erdogan, and between Jared Kushner and Erdogan's son-in-law. Like, if we don't think that the corruption is running in both directions here, we're blind to it too. So in other words, Americans who don't want America to become an authoritarian country have to realize that our support for authoritarians ends up boomeranging back into America. Like, what kind of people do you think Mohammed bin Salman supports in American politics?
That's why
not the progressives,
Yeah, that's why I love the subtitle of your book, on being American in the world we've made. It's not only all of us, but it's not only Americans, but we all made it, actually. Yeah. Not personally you and me, obviously, but this was a collaboration.
No, it's an expression of our personal choices. Like, and it's tied to this enough thing. America has been driven by the pursuit of so much excess, particularly in terms of wealth, that we lost sight of, like, the more meaningful project of being a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy as the thing that defines us, and that's where we have to get back. Or, I mean, we never had it totally, but we have to get back to the aspiration for that being the kind of North Star.
Well, aspirations are reality as well. Something I learned in Bristol when Andrew invited me to Bristol. There is a, I mentioned it in the book. There is a tour in Bristol, a touristic tour called Unbuilt Bristol. So you basically go to places that do not exist. I love this idea because it inspired me to write, choose the whole reality chapter, which is like aspirations are included in the history as well. So yeah, aspirations are real and we have to hold on to them, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's, we have to hold on to them. That's the hope. But as you say, you have to have the faith and commitment and determination to work for those aspirations. I mean, that's kind of where I landed in terms of people asking me, like, what do you think American identity is? And would you like it to be? And we are not the multiracial, multi-ethnic ideal of equality, but the work in pursuit of that is, to me, what the identity is. Doing the work of trying to be what we tell the world we are. That's what being American should be.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a funny story to you. Not a funny. It's a story that you'd like, I think, and Andrew, you'd like this too. My mother was a leftist, and obviously she's still a leftist, but she was like included in an organization when she was at the university, and she told me this story. When they were in the middle school, they were taught English by Peace Corps, young Americans who came with the Peace Corps. And she said that when there was a big, demonstration in Izmir, all the leaders of all factions were actually, leftists. They were all educated by these Peace Corps. So that aspiration was very important in Middle East when it was pure and dedicated. So yeah.
The great thing about the Peace Corps is that it had no, and I know it's contrary to how some people may think. Like we had no control. It's just people who want to go work in other countries and try to help other people. There's no, I had no capacity when I was in the White House to kind of like select the issues that the Peace Corps people will work on. It was purely just it was that your thing about love. It was just saying like, hey, we think it would be good for Americans if they could go live and work in other places, and it'll be good for those people too, and they'll make a connection, and that's it. And that, I think, has been one of the most successful kind of foreign policy initiatives of the last 70 years, because it was just from a good place,
Yeah.
We're running out of time, I'm afraid. I mean, this has been the most brilliant conversation. And I'm very grateful to both of you. I wanted to ask you just to have one final question, which is about, I mean, Ece, you put forward 10 choices for a better now. We're not going to go through all of those and so on, but I wanted to talk to both of you about the better together idea. And could you just talk us through that final choice of yours, Ece? And then I've got a particular question for Ben coming out of that.
Well, especially during the pandemic, and I wrote the book during the pandemic, but it was already there, this phenomena. If I confine myself into this safe space, I can wait until this global mess is over. There is this inclination in people. I keep seeing it, and people are going out of the cities. People are being more and more on their own, and so on. So I thought this togetherness, the idea of togetherness, has to be refreshed, and I felt like I have to remind people the joy of being together, to be one, and so on. And I'm talking about political oneness, not religious oneness. So yeah, that's why I named the book Together. But I have to make a confession, Andrew. The book is published in Britain, as you know. So the subtitle choices is a little bit domesticated for British audience. Yeah, I'm going to change the subtitle in paperback edition. Yeah, together is like, I'm choosing you, you can choose me, because this is a time when we are finding it too difficult to promise each other. And I think we forgot the fact that human beings are prone to sacrificing themselves for each other. This is something I learned in Beirut. People want to be one, and people want to the self wants to melt into one, because self is a big, huge burden to people, and the weight of it can only be lighter if it's shared. So this idea is also political, as well as philosophical. So I thought, yeah, togetherness, the beauty of togetherness might be reminded again to the people who are thinking about the world and who are concerned about the current situation.
And Ben, there's a story in your book about you're having breakfast and you talk to the person who's serving your breakfast, who turns out to be someone who's politically diametrically opposed to you, and you have a discussion with them, and they finally find out the next day who you actually are. But one thing that in talking about this idea of togetherness is how do we talk to people who are our political opponents, and how do we come to some sort of common ground? And can we, in fact?
I mean, that particular experience was interesting because I described this experience in this interaction with someone who clearly believed all manner of conspiracy theories about me that I knew to be wrong. And then when she figured out who I was, she was incredibly nice. I mean, she was kind of apologetic, and then I was apologetic just for being the character she thought I was, in a way. And it was kind of like what Ece was just saying, like we wanted to like each other. Like we wanted, and she's like, but you're so nice. That's not what the depiction of you that in the media I consume. And I'm like, well, no, but you're very nice too. And, we were like reassuring each other. I think that's actually the natural human instinct, is usually not to kind of go and want to hate somebody. And in a way, the online piece of this is part of the problem. It's so easy to hate people online. It's so easy to dehumanize people online. Like people say things to me every now and then, Ece, you like this, like I actually respond to, because I have a lot of trolls, and every now and then I'll see some unhinged thing. Someone wants me to die and wants my kids to die. And I'll just write back to them and be like, do you realize like I'm a person? Like, and most often then they quickly apologize, so there's this dehumanizing thing that happens online. I think that basically, what we have to figure out. I was listening to Ece talk and thinking like there was a slogan here in Los Angeles that I write about at the end of my book. During COVID, they put on all the billboards, "Alone Together," which was one of these things that was like, it's just some government slogan somebody came up with, but I thought it was like profound because everybody is alone and we're doing that together. And I found myself kind of wishing, my aspiration, right, is that like America was supposed to be the place where like you could be whoever the hell you wanted to be, you could be left alone with your beliefs, no matter what you look like or where that's what we tell ourselves we're supposed to be. And yet that adds up to a national identity that doesn't force anybody to change something about who they are. And to me, like the reason that matters in American democracy is like people here are from everywhere. And if we can somehow achieve a reality where everybody can be whoever the hell they want to be, and we can all kind of work it out, and we can still hate each other on some issues and fight about things, but it's fundamentally accept that our national identity is anybody can be an American. That to me is like a metaphor for like the world figuring that out. And so the experience of that woman was like both an indication of how much trouble we're in, that this, nice, seemingly rational person believes things that are just totally not true. That's a problem. But her instinct and the human instinct to want to connect and be together, is the solution. And to some extent, you have to kind of leave people alone a bit. I don't need to change your mind about everything. But I think we do have to be uncompromising about democracy means that everybody gets to be who they want, not just you. And in fascism is its opposite, right? And we have to everybody's on a spectrum here from democracy to fascism, and we've just drifted over here in the wrong direction. We have to pull that back. And I think the idea of togetherness and that human instinct, I don't think humans want to, the majority of people want to live in the fascism end of the spectrum. And that ultimately is hopeful.
Just one final question, which is one thing Ece, there's various things that we can do now, the choices we make and so on. But, renewing democracy is a long-term project, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've let it lapse for,
Yes.
actually, we all guilty about letting it lapse for so long, really, and to decline. This is the long term, isn't it? I'll start with you, Ben, and then end with you, Ece.
No, that's exactly right. And look, we're in a dangerous, perilous moment now, as we talked about in terms of America before. But I think there's almost this kind of misguided sense of, well, if only the Democrats could get their act together and pass this voting rights bill, then we'll be protected. No, like this has been eroding for decades. And this is a multi-generational project that is not to be left, by the way, just to governments and presidents. I've been there. Even if Barack Obama done everything right, like he couldn't have fixed most of this. Like it takes like a whole of society commitment to democracy that is sustained over time. That's where we're at.
Okay.
Democracy is an aspiration. It's a ongoing process, and it's an infinite aspiration. So yes, there is no end to it. On a different note, dialogue is overrated within democracy because we cannot have dialogue with fascists, the militants, the guys who is leading the fascist movement and so on. Sometimes politics means fighting, and democracy includes that fight because democracy has the right to protect itself. So we have to be careful about that togetherness. Togetherness does not include everyone. It only includes those people who believe in togetherness, who believe in, that democracy is a place where we can be with our dignity, with justice, and so on. So yeah, I think we are going through a setback. But then I believe in people. This is not just, I'm not just saying it. I do believe in people. And this is not because I am inspired by them every day. This is not because they are perfect. It is just, I am making a moral and political choice to believe in humankind, in my kind, and the fact that we can be better, we can do better.
Well, thank you, Ben and Ece. Copies of After the Fall, Together, and all of the books from our speakers today are available from our partners at Waterstones and in all good bookshops. Do check our website for all our new events, including in September, our return to live presentations. And the website also has links to our past events, articles to read, and much more, including reading guides to both Ben and Ece's work, our speakers today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you most of all, Ben and Ece. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. It was wonderful, Ben. Thank you.
Yeah, great to see you, Ece.